Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into the book of Joshua today, specifically chapter 17.
Oh, this is a good one. Lots to unpack here.
It is. It's all about inheritance, and facing some pretty tough situations like those iron chariots everyone always talks about.
Yeah, that's high-tech weaponry for that time.
Imagine. So anyway, the Israelites are in the Promised Land. Finally.
Right, after that whole Exodus thing.
Exactly. But now they got to figure out who gets what.
It's never simple, is it?
Nope. So chapter 17 focuses on the tribe of Manasseh.
Descendants of Joseph. And that already adds some layers, with those family dynamics.
For sure. And inheritance back then wasn't just some sentimental thing, right? This was land resources.
The future of entire families for generations.
So the stakes are HHH.
Absolutely. And within Manasseh, you've got all these different family groups.
Each wanting their fair share.
More like the biggest share, probably.
Huh, I bet. And there are a lot of interesting stories within this chapter. But one that stands out is about these,
Zelophehad's daughters?
Yes, Zelophehad's daughters. This story really gets at the heart of God's justice, even in the midst of all this land-dividing drama.
Yeah, it's a powerful story. So Zelophehad, he dies. No sons,
Oh,
but 5 daughters.
Okay, so back then, inheritance, it usually went through the male line.
Exactly. So you can see the problem.
Big problem.
Yeah.
What were these women supposed to do?
Well, they do something pretty amazing. They go straight to Moses and Eleazar, the leaders.
Bold move.
Right. And they basically say, hey, we deserve a share of our father's inheritance too.
Seriously?
Yeah, even though they were women, they knew it was right.
Talk about standing up for what you believe in. So did the leaders listen?
They did. And get this, their claim is honored. They receive an inheritance, just like their uncles.
That's incredible they actually won. What a victory.
It is. It shows God's concept of justice. It goes beyond the typical gender roles and societal norms of the time.
It recognizes individuals and their right to fair treatment. Wow, so we've got this great story of justice. But things weren't always smooth sailing for Manasseh.
Unfortunately not. They settle in parts of the territory, yeah.
But they didn't drive out all the Canaanites who were already living there.
Not all of them.
And what happens?
Well, some, they ended up subjugating them, made them work as forced labor.
That doesn't really sound like the best foundation for a peaceful society.
You're right. It's like they just pushed the problem aside instead of dealing with it. And we all know how that usually ends up.
Yeah, it always comes back to bite you later on.
Exactly. And it did. Their disobedience, not fully possessing the land, it caused all sorts of problems down the road.
It's a cautionary tale, telling us to deal with those tough issues head on.
Even when it's hard, it's better than ignoring them.
Oh, speaking of tough, what about those iron chariots?
Ah, yes. The Canaanites in one part of Manasseh's territory.
They were known for having these chariots, like top-of-the-line military tech.
You can only imagine how intimidating that must have been.
Oh, absolutely. They had this land, but not completely, and on top of that.
We're facing this serious threat.
So what happens next?
Well, believe it or not, the tribe of Manasseh, they go to Joshua to complain.
Seriously? Complain about they just got a huge chunk of the Promised Land.
I know, right? But they felt it wasn't enough.
Really?
They grumbled that it wasn't large enough for their growing population, all their livestock.
Oh, come on. Talk about a sense of entitlement.
It's funny how easily people forget the hardships they've endured.
Right, and just focus on what they think they lack. So what did Joshua do?
Now, this is where his leadership really shines. He doesn't just give in to their demands.
Good.
But he doesn't dismiss them either. Instead, he challenges them.
How so?
He basically tells them, look, if you need more land, go take it.
Take it.
Clear out that tough forested hill country where some of their enemies were, with those chariots.
Whoa. That is a bold response. Go earn it.
Exactly. Joshua understood that true growth comes from overcoming challenges.
Not from entitlement. Powerful leadership lesson right there.
It is. He wanted them to be courageous, resourceful, not just expect handouts.
It makes you think, first we have those daughters fighting for their inheritance.
Right.
And now this whole tribe having to face a very real enemy.
With advanced weaponry, no less.
What a parallel. So what does all this mean for us today, in our modern world, I mean?
It's a great question, and something we'll dig into more as we keep going with this deep dive. But the thing that stands out to me, we all face giants.
Who do?
Maybe not literal iron chariots, but challenges that seem impossible. Stuff that makes us want to hide or complain.
So the question is, do we cower? Or do we rise to the occasion? Like these people in the book of Joshua. Yeah, it's easy to let fear take over, right? But the book of Joshua, it's all about action. It's like a guidebook for dealing with those giants in our lives.
I love that, a guidebook. And it's not about being totally fearless. It's about acting in spite of our fears.
Because those iron chariots, they weren't just weapons. They were like a whole system of power, a threat to their way of life.
You're right, exactly. And Joshua got that. He knew the Israelites could beat this enemy. But first,
A mindset shift was needed.
yes, they needed to believe it.
It's interesting though, right? Because we often think leaders should just give us the answers,
Clear the path for us.
right? But sometimes the best kind of leadership,
Is empowering people to find their own solutions.
it's like those sports movies, you know? The tough coach who pushes the team to their absolute limit.
Great analogy. Not because he's mean, but
For us
because...
to use their potential.
Exactly. Even when they don't see it themselves. And that's Joshua. He reminds Manasseh of their strengths, their numbers.
And that they have God on their side. That's huge.
Absolutely. He's like, stop focusing on what you lack. You've got this.
So simple, but so powerful. We can apply that to anything.
Right. When you're facing a problem, so easy to get stuck on the negative stuff.
To think about all the reasons why you'll fail.
But Joshua's like, nope, get up and do something.
He's all about action. So step one, shift your perspective.
Yes. See your strengths instead of your limitations.
And then
Take action. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start moving.
even small steps, right?
Exactly. The Israelites didn't just waltz into the promised land. They fought for it. They had obstacles, setbacks.
But they're resilient?
Exactly. So the promised land, it wasn't just a place. It was a state of being, something they earned.
I love that. So how does that apply to us? What are our promised lands?
Great question. The things we dream of but think are impossible,
Yeah, the things that whisper to us.
instead of letting them fade away, what if we found the courage to chase them, to actually take action?
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right.
Well, what about when things go wrong? Because they will, right?
Of course. Life is messy.
So what do we do when we hit those roadblocks?
Yeah.
When we feel like giving up?
That's where those daughters come back in. They didn't sit around waiting.
They fought for what they deserve?
They changed the system.
So sometimes we have to be the ones to make the change.
Yes. Speak up, even when it feels impossible.
So it's not just facing our giants. It's about realizing we have the power to change things.
To create a new reality. That's leadership.
That brings us to Joshua, right? He wasn't just a military guy.
No, he was a visionary, a motivator.
He understood that real leadership, it's about empowering people.
To be their best. And, we often think of leadership as being in charge, giving orders. But Joshua,
He was more collaborative.
he engaged people, made them think, encouraged them to take responsibility.
Like, we're all in this together. Let's make something amazing happen.
That feeling of shared purpose, that's powerful.
So it's not just about individual courage. It's about community, too.
Working together to overcome obstacles, support each other, it's timeless. We need that today, just as much as ancient Israel.
So what made Joshua such a good leader? What can we learn from him?
We could do a whole other deep dive on that. But here's a thought. It wasn't just about strategy.
It was about who he was as a person.
Yes. He inspired people, created a culture of resilience, and that's something we can all work towards.
Whether we're leading a team or just trying to be a good influence.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our dive into Joshua 17, what's the big idea you want people to take away? It really does make you think, this whole chapter. It's like inheriting something isn't just about getting it. It's about what you do with it.
It is. That responsibility piece is key. They got this gift, this land, but they had to work for it too.
Be courageous, face challenges. It wasn't just land, it was a whole mindset they were inheriting.
It's what allowed them to build a nation, to create something lasting. That spirit of courage, resilience.
It's making me think about all those times I focus on what I don't have, all those resources I think I'm missing.
It's easy to do that.
Right, but maybe I've missed the potential I already do have because of that.
It happens to the best of us. And think about it. These Israelites, they had just escaped slavery, 40 years in the wilderness.
They knew hard times.
They did. And still. They're given this incredible land overflowing with abundance.
And they complain.
It's almost funny, isn't it? But it's human nature, too. We focus on what we think is missing, what's unfair.
And that's where good leadership comes in.
Yeah.
Joshua didn't let them wallow.
Exactly. He didn't ignore them, but he didn't give in either.
He redirected them, channeled their energy into something productive.
He's basically like, you think you deserve more. Okay, Prove it. Show me what you can do.
And in the process, they not only gain more land.
They build character, that toughness they needed to thrive.
So maybe the biggest challenges, they're actually the best gifts. They push us to grow.
It's a good way to look at it. So thinking about all this, what are your iron chariots?
And what are those big things standing between you and your dreams?
And how can you tap into that courage like those daughters to overcome them? It won't be easy, but the book of Joshua shows us.
With courage and action, anything is possible.
And you don't have to do it alone. We've got each other, we've got our communities, and something even bigger to lean on if you believe in that kind of thing.
Love that. Well, that wraps up another deep dive.
Been a pleasure.
Always a fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And until next time, keep exploring.